You probably assume that before alarm clocks, before electricity, before the relentless pull of screens and notifications, humans slept better, longer, more deeply. You picture our ancestors lying down at sunset and rising with the sun, 8 uninterrupted hours of perfect natural rest. It is a comforting image. It is also almost certainly wrong. The sleep of ancient humans was not what you think it was. And the story of how and why it changed is one of the strangest and most quietly important discoveries in the science of human biology. Start with what researchers actually found when they studied it. Anthropologist Jerome Siegel spent years studying 3 of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. These groups live without electricity, without artificial light, without smartphones or social media or any of the modern disruptions we blame for our broken sleep. If bad sleep is a modern problem caused by modern life, these people should sleep beautifully. They do not sleep 8 hours. They do not sleep in one long, unbroken stretch. On average, they sleep between 6 and 7.5 hours per night. They go to sleep not at sunset but several hours after it, when the air temperature begins to drop. They wake before sunrise. And critically, they almost never report insomnia. They do not lie awake dreading wakefulness. They simply sleep and then they do not, and neither state causes them distress. What Siegel's research quietly demolished was the idea that 8 hours of continuous sleep is the natural human baseline. It may instead be a modern invention, or more precisely, an expectation we invented and then failed to meet, and then called a disorder. But there is a deeper layer to this story. Because ancient humans did not just sleep differently in terms of duration. They slept differently in terms of structure. And understanding that structure changes everything you think you know about waking up in the middle of the night. Historian Roger Ekirch spent 16 years combing through pre-industrial diaries, medical texts, court records, and literature from across Europe. What he found, buried in centuries of documents, was a sleep pattern that almost no one alive today practices or even knows existed. He called it segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep, 2 sleeps. Before the Industrial Revolution, across centuries of recorded history, the dominant human sleep pattern was not one long block. It was 2 distinct periods of sleep separated by an hour or 2 of wakefulness in the middle of the night. People would sleep for 3 or 4 hours, wake up naturally, spend an hour or 2 in a state of quiet alertness. Praying, reading, talking with a partner, having sex, lying in contemplative thought, and then return to sleep for another 3 or 4 hours before rising for the day. This was not considered unusual. It was not insomnia. It was not a problem to be solved. It was simply how nighttime worked. Ekirch found references to the first sleep and the second sleep in documents spanning 6 centuries and dozens of cultures. The hour between the 2 sleeps had a name. People called it the watch or the watching hour. It was considered a particularly fertile time for thought, for prayer, for intimacy. Writers wrote about it. Doctors recommended activities for it. It was woven into the fabric of ordinary life. And then it vanished. Within roughly a century following the widespread adoption of artificial light, gas lamps first, then electric light, the 2-sleep pattern disappeared almost entirely from the historical record. The night compressed. The watching hour was swallowed. People began sleeping in one consolidated block, and the expectation that this was normal, that this was how humans had always slept, became so total that anyone who woke naturally in the middle of the night began to believe something was wrong with them. Psychiatrist Thomas Wehr at the National Institute of Mental Health ran an experiment in the 1990s that revealed just how deep the old pattern runs. He removed artificial light from a group of participants for weeks, limiting them to 14 hours of darkness per night. Within a few weeks, almost every participant spontaneously shifted into a biphasic sleep pattern. They began sleeping in 2 distinct segments, separated by 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness. Their bodies had not forgotten. The old rhythm was still there, waiting beneath the surface of the consolidated sleep we had trained ourselves into. So why did ancient humans sleep this way in the first place? The answers point in several directions, and none of them are simple. One answer is temperature. The Hadza and other hunter-gatherer groups studied by Siegel do not fall asleep at sunset, partly because the early night is too warm. They wait until the air cools, then sleep, Then stir again in the coldest hours before dawn and wait for warmth before rising fully. Temperature, not light, appears to be one of the primary regulators of the ancestral sleep cycle. Another answer is predation. For most of human evolutionary history, the night was dangerous. Sleeping in one long unguarded block for 8 hours would have been a vulnerability. A group in which some members woke naturally in the middle of the night, alert, watchful, present, was a group more likely to survive an attack in the dark. Waking at night was not a failure of the sleep system. It may have been a feature of it. A third answer involves the structure of the brain itself during that middle-of-the-night waking period. The sleep between the first and second sleep contains an unusually high proportion of REM sleep, the stage associated with dreaming, emotional processing, memory consolidation, and creative connection-making. The watching hour, that quiet interlude between the two sleeps, follows a period rich in REM and precedes another. People who woke in that window were not waking because their sleep was broken. They were waking into a state of unusual mental openness, a kind of soft consciousness that sits between dreaming and full waking. Some researchers believe this is why the hour between sleeps was historically associated with vivid dreams, spiritual experience, and creative insight. The brain in that state is doing something specific, something that consolidated modern sleep may interrupt or compress. Consider what this means for you. If you wake at 2 or 3 in the morning and lie there, alert and unable to return to sleep immediately, your instinct is probably to treat it as a problem. You check the clock. You calculate how many hours remain. You feel anxiety about the lost sleep compounding the wakefulness itself. You reach for your phone. You run through your to-do list. You wonder what is wrong with you. What if nothing is wrong with you? What if you are simply doing what human beings have done for most of recorded history, waking between your first and second sleep, entering the watching hour, the quiet interlude that your ancestors filled not with dread but with rest of a different kind? The anxiety about middle-of-the-night waking may be more damaging than the waking itself. Sleep researchers have found that people who accept nighttime waking without distress, who lie quietly, breathe slowly, allow the mind to wander, often drift back to sleep naturally within an hour. The waking is not the problem. The panic about the waking is the problem. And that panic is a modern invention, born from a modern expectation of consolidated sleep that may never have been the human norm. There is something else worth sitting with. The ancient human relationship with sleep was not just different in structure. It was different in meaning. Sleep was not simply the absence of wakefulness, the gap between productive hours that needed to be optimized and protected and tracked with an app. The night was a different kind of time. The darkness had its own texture. The watching hour between sleeps was not dead time or wasted time. It was its own kind of consciousness, softer, more porous, more connected to the inner life than the hard clarity of daytime thought. We have built a world of artificial light and consolidated sleep and sleep tracking devices and melatonin supplements and an entire industry devoted to fixing what may not be broken in the way we think it is. We have pathologized a waking pattern that our ancestors considered ordinary. We have declared an ancient rhythm a disorder. The next time you wake in the dark at 2 in the morning, before you reach for your phone, before you count the hours, before the anxiety takes hold, remember this. You are not broken. You are not failing at sleep. You may simply be a human being doing what human beings have always done, in the quiet hours between one sleep and another, in the oldest and most natural darkness there is.